What's up everybody, David here, and I am a music producer. I've mixed, written, released over 100 songs throughout my music career. I do a bunch of other stuff too, but yeah, that's one of them. And today I want to go through all of our favorite app, which of course is TikTok, and react to some good or maybe not so good music production advice.
This is how you get your vocals to sit perfectly within your mix. Turn the volume all the way down, but I did it within the sidechain, which I'm going to explain. Route it or sidechain it to a track with your beat or all your instruments on it.
Okay, so first of all, I don't work in FL Studio, so all the technical things that he's doing, they're probably right, but I don't know. But in general, once you sidechain your vocals to your beat, that's like a sprinkle on the top. I wouldn't use that to make up for things that you have lacking in your mix, for example. First, make sure your vocals do sit very nicely in your mix, and maybe there's just like a couple of spots where you feel like the mids, which is where the vocal lives, it's too crowded together with the beat. So, you know, get those like last couple percent, but don't use this technique to just like a general solution to your mixing needs. That's not what it is. I do think though it is a very helpful tool to do that sidechaining technique with your vocals. So I would give that tip probably a 7 out of 10. It is helpful, but only in very specific situations and when you don't overdo it.
How much money do you need to get started to become a music producer?
One of my favorite questions is, what gear do I need to get started with making beats, with producing music? And let's see what she has to say about gear selection.
Well, if you want the bare minimum to get started, you'll need a computer to work on. You can get a used Apple for around $1,000.
Okay, so I understand that people that are creative like Apple products, but you do not need to spend $1,000 on a computer. For example, what I would recommend right now, this is the base model M1 MacBook Air, and you can get these used for like 500 bucks at this point, and they are perfect for music production. Yeah, you do not need to spend 1,000 euros or dollars on a computer.
Need an audio interface.
So the Scarlett is a bit of a meme in the audio production community, but at this point all the entry-level interfaces basically sound the same to me. Honestly, if you're looking for something around like 100 or 200 bucks, it's all basically the same thing. It doesn't really matter, I think.
Headphones. Then optionally, if you're recording vocals, you'll need a condenser mic. And a MIDI controller is good just for jamming. Mixing your own music, then you'll need some monitors. And at the very beginning, just use blankets and clothes for sound isolation.
Okay, so I think a lot of people get this mixed up. There's sound isolation and there's absorption or treatment. Isolation means you want to keep sound from getting into your room or your working space or out of your room or your working space. That is very, very, very difficult to do. Sound absorption and sound treatment, on the other hand, is something very different, which is you want to treat your room in a way where it will make it just sound a little bit better for mixing. It's going to sound more true to what's coming out of your speakers. What I would recommend in the beginning is don't worry about it too much. I actually have a tip. Hold on a second. So rather than spending a lot of money on sound treatment and stuff, what I would do in the beginning, get yourself one of these. This is a little, what is it, Sony boombox radio type situation, and these are fantastic to mix on because they sound not good, but in the right way. So these are super mid-rangey. They don't have a lot of treble, they don't have a lot of bass, and most of the music that we listen to lives in the mid-range. To get a general balance in your mix and in your beats and in your music, these are fantastic. The one thing when you do buy one, it needs to have a line input to, you know, connect it to your laptop.
Instead of spending all of your money on gear, spend it on education. The thousands of dollars I have spent on production and audio courses has been 10x more valuable than any equipment I've ever bought.
Okay, so yes and no. I agree with you don't need to spend a lot of money on gear to start it out with. Instead, invest in educating yourself. I just don't think you need to spend thousands of euros or dollars on courses to do that. I think there's so many free resources out there, a lot of which are very, very good. I will link a couple of people down below that I think do an excellent job in educating somebody who's starting out in music. And besides that, I think something she left out completely is sounds. So if you're a producer that makes beats, that is doing hip hop, pop production, R&B production, what's incredibly important. Building your portfolio of sounds, I would call it. And for that, just get yourself a Splice subscription. Honestly, it's like $8 a month and it will get you all the sounds you'll ever need to produce. And another thing is you need to build your taste because you need to make choices on what sounds to use, what compressors, what plugins to use, how to treat those sounds. And that will just come with experience. So you just need to do that. You don't need to invest any money into that. You just need to invest your time and just keep doing it. So sounds and taste is something very underappreciated in music, I think. So I think overall I would give her a 7 out of 10.
Does your music sound like Aquaman mixed it underwater?
Okay, mixing. This is also part of the music production process, but it's a little bit more specific. So let's see what he has to say.
Tips to help you float to the top. When I'm working on my music, I always go back and forth between my headphones, monitors, AirPods, honestly, anything you can find that makes music come out. I find that this helps me get a much more realistic idea of what my mix sounds like. Another
Let's see if he mentions acoustic treatment, because I want him to mention acoustic treatment.
thing to keep in mind is that most of us, including myself, don't have professionally treated rooms.
Nice.
So here's a microphone I would recommend that's really inexpensive but extremely high quality. I used the Shure SM58, and to prove you don't need a $10,000 mic for good vocals, here's a little clip of some vocals I recently recorded. You would never know that I recorded that on a mic that costs under $100.
Yes, I would know. The SM58 is a popular option for on-stage microphone. A lot of backup singers use it on stage. I've heard even Taylor Swift, they used it to record some backing vocals in the studio for her. It has a very specific sound though. It is very mid-rangey. It doesn't sound very hi-fi. I honestly think that condenser mics these days have gotten so good that you can probably get by with that. But one point that I think he is right about is that if you have no acoustic treatment, putting a very good microphone into an untreated room doesn't make a lot of sense. So in that case, I kind of agree with it, I guess. If you just want to start out, you know, recording vocals, the 58 can work. It's not a studio microphone though, so don't expect it to sound like, you know, a $10,000 microphone or even a $1,000 microphone. I absolutely agree with switching between different sources of monitoring, like my little radio over here. For that tip, I would give 9 out of 10 because he didn't mention like a little boombox. For the microphone, I would give a 5 out of 10. It depends on what you want to do and what your situation is.
Producers, if you want to level up your music production, use these 5 free effect plugins. First, we got
Okay, so we have some free plugins. I was waiting for one of these.
Fin Micro by UJam. Not only does this thing come with 25 banging effects, but the interface is super easy to use. Next, we got OTT by Expert. Almost everyone in the EDM.
Okay, yeah, OTT is a free plugin. Use it carefully though. You can really destroy your sounds when you first download it, and I've for sure done this. It can really mess with your overall tone if you just throw it in everything and crank it up. But it can also give you a certain sound and a certain tone that you would really like on your track. So yes, download it, play around with it. It is a great plugin.
At 3, we got Magic Switch by Baby Audio. This plugin emulates the fabled Juno chorus effects from the 1980s.
Okay, so the Juno back in the 1980s was a keyboard, was a synthesizer that was famous for a lot of the sounds you've heard in the 80s, big pad sounds, big chorus sounds like he mentioned, and the chorus on it was a very specific sound of effects unit of a chorus. I have never used this before, but if this does a good job of emulating that certain chorus sound, then I would absolutely go for it because that is a beautiful, lush sound.
Perfect for giving your tracks a deeply vintage feel. At 4, we got Pancake 2 by Cable Guys. From the same guys that made Halftime, Pancake 2 is one of the best plugins for panning.
I love little panning and tremolo plugins like that because it's very different from the OTT, for example, where it doesn't really mess with the overall like meat of your sound. It just adds a little bit to it. And panning, again, you can absolutely overdo it, but it is also something that is super simple, that's been around forever, and you can actually do a lot with if you do it smartly. And here it comes back to taste. You know, you have to do it tastefully.
Lastly, at 5, we got Ambience by Smart Electronics. Just an all-around excellent.
So I think he has some cool free plugins in here, most of which I haven't used, but I think it's a smart set of plugins. So I would give this a 10 out of 10, give them a try, see what you can do with them. Okay, so another video telling you what gear to get, basically. Let's see if this one can beat the other one. Nothing to discuss, cause I did win by default and without any doubt. There we have the Focusrite again. Of course, there's a Focusrite in there. I put my life into my Okay, this is kind of a weird list. MIDI keyboard, sure, if you want to make beats and you actually like feel like using one, I guess. I don't think it is really necessary though. External hard drives, yes, absolutely. Back up your stuff. The Focusrite audio interface, I guess if you only make beats, you can absolutely plug in your headphones right into your computer. I don't care what people say. It is good enough to start out with. It's not perfect, it's not great, and he doesn't even mention a computer, so. I put my life. Brains, yes, of course. I would call it taste, I guess is what he means, which I talked about earlier. I would give this list like a 2 out of 10, because it's a really weird list. I don't quite understand it. 3 out of 10 max.
This is a trick every music producer should know. It's
What is the trick that every music producer should know?
the pumping effect you hear in every pop song ever.
Okay, so we've all heard this done a lot in EDM and all sorts of electronic music, of course. It is called sidechain compression. I'm gonna save you the rest of the video. Just get a plugin for it, honestly. There are a couple of paid options out there. For example, LFO Tool, that's a cool option. There's this company called Tel Audio, Tel Software, and they make a bunch of free plugins that are actually very cool to use that I use like all the time. Oh yes, it's the Tel Filter 2 is what it's called. It is so much easier to use than setting up all this stuff. So I would give this a 7 out of 10 because what he says absolutely works, and sidechain compression you can use for a lot of other things and you should learn it. But for this case, I think there's just easier and better options out there. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something today and see you in the next video.